Hey there, Hit Like a Girl pod listeners. We've got some exciting news that's too good to keep to ourselves. You all know Grace Minton, whose stories have captivated us over the past couple years. Well, Grace has been doing such an amazing job with her show, High Tea with Grace, that it's time for her to shine even brighter. Yes, you heard that right. High Tea with Grace has graduated to its own show with its own brand new RSS feed. While we've loved sharing Grace's episodes as special bonuses on the Hit Like a Girl pod, it's now time to give Grace the spotlight she deserves. So what does that mean for you? To continue enjoying the compelling stories and insights from Grace, head over to your favorite podcast platform and hit that subscribe button for High Tea with Grace. Trust us, you don't want to miss out on what she has in store. Her latest series is dedicated to understanding the VC funding world, aka Fund Like a Girl. Thank you for supporting us, and let's show some love for Grace on her exciting new journey. Remember, search for High Tea with Grace and subscribe today. Welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Joy Rios. On this show, we talk about the jillion puzzle pieces that makes up healthcare, because it is a super complicated world, and I like to amplify the women who are making a difference and contributing to that space. So please, I'm so excited to get to know you. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure will. So first of all, thank you for having me. I've actually followed the podcast, so I was super excited to get the invite. But just a bit of background on me. So my name is Larissa DAndrea. I'm head of our global impact programs at ResMed, which is a medical device, medical technology company in respiratory, software as a service. We provide different digital tools for patients, for clinicians, for others. So really in the healthcare space. And we've got a lot of engagement with associations and organizations to really improve and enable access in the healthcare ecosystem. My job encompasses functions like government affairs, so all the public policy work across the world, working with different governments, associations. I've got a clinical advocacy group, patient advocacy focus. We also do environmental and social governance stewardship for the company.
I love all of this.
And we started to fill in some gaps by having a bit more of a communications and event management, really tied to sort of campaigns and engaging with physicians, patients, and others. And I was just mentioning before we jumped into this, my other passion is storytelling. So while I grew up in the sciences, I also was a storyteller. And during the pandemic, I took an opportunity to start to self-fund underrepresented voices. And that has nicely translated and brought that back into ResMed. So we've done a lot more of, whether it's graffiti art or other filmmaking mediums, with patient stories, and really centering everything we do around patients and actually the technology impact on patients' lives.
That is so important. And it's so great to hear, because that's been something we've been talking about a lot of, okay, there's all this technology, but how is it actually helping the end user? And so can you share any examples of some of those patient stories and how they have actually affected the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're talking about two things here too, right? One is the inclusivity of real users as part of the design, development, deployment, so that, we're not just in this ivory tower making something and then deploying it, but truly incorporating a diverse set of voices and users as part of the development of products, services, et cetera. That's one aspect. And then really thinking about how that patient journey or clinician journey is impacted by whether that's the policies or the technology or things that exist today. So I'll give you a bit of an example. So one of the things we're well known for is we have sleep apnea diagnosis and therapy technology. Part of that technology all has cellular connectivity, so you can have data in the cloud. The patient can have an engagement application so they can follow their own therapy, engage in their own therapy. They're empowered. And then there's clinical applications, so a clinician can look at how their therapy is going and then actively engage, changing their settings or have a better conversation. And when we took a stab at really thinking about patient stories, we started working with some of the patient associations. So the ASAA, which is the American Sleep Apnea Association. And we pulled together stories from a diverse set of voices. So we tried to be representative of ethnicities and male to female in the population. And they really just told their story about, how was I diagnosed?
Yep.
How hard was it?
Yep.
How accessible was healthcare in general to even whether it's get to a doctor, get their diagnosis. And then what therapy was like. And, it is no secret that starting on a CPAP machine is not easy. you have a mask and it can be difficult. And I have a partner who has that as well.
I want to talk about this.
Yes, let's do it. But it's that empowerment, and those stories are important, and you shouldn't shy away from like the tough stuff.
Yeah. So my sister's partner wears a CPAP machine now. She says it's like sleeping next to Darth Vader. But
I'm sure her partner feels that way too, by the way.
But you know what? He was telling me about the app because he's a lawyer and was recently in trial. And there was one night before that he was in trial that he had a sleepless night, and like intentionally. And he was going and tracking the quality of his sleep over the last several weeks or whatever. And it was to be discussed with his doctor. And they were like, oh yeah, we understand why this happened. And they were really digging into the data. So cool. It's very cool.
It's super interesting. And like to just pull on that thread a bit, because it empowers him to have a conversation using data. And, from a lawyer's perspective, he's well educated, but there are lots of patients out there that either are more reticent to have deeper conversations, but when you put tools in their hands that they can own their own healthcare journey and give them data to like inspire them to have conversations, and sometimes maybe contentious with their physician or their care team, it really empowers in a new and unique way. And they have an opportunity to dictate more what their journey is going to look like.
And okay, so tell me more about some of the storytelling that has come from that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I was just looking at some of the art, the graffiti art. I'm hugely passionate about art that has a message. One of the, I think, second events that we did a couple of years ago, we actually hired a graffiti artist to come in, and we took two patients, a sleep apnea patient and a patient who had asthma and COPD. He interviewed them, had conversations, and then he did these massive panels that we ultimately showcased. And it was really meant to provide a visual interpretation of that patient's experience. And there is nothing like really seeing something and feeling it in a different way, because that's actually what creates empathy, understanding, and can create change. And certainly from my perspective, the way we drive access, the way we drive empowering folks, it is through changing some of the policies in the healthcare system. But to do that through visual mediums is so powerful. And actually the COPD patient, I'll have to send you an image of it, but it'll just paint a picture. The image of it is a body underwater with a snake wrapped around.
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of jarring and shocking. And to have that as a tech conference, people were like, whoa. But when we filmed the patient walking in and seeing it for the first time, she cried, and her response to it was, oh my gosh, this is really what it feels like. Often with COPD, people tell you it feels like an elephant on your chest. She said, no, it feels like I'm being squeezed.
Oh, wow.
And it's just that powerful. And we coupled that visual piece of art with stories of these two patients. And we had interview style, and then actually just had them in their own elements, their home or the beach or the environment, and just documentary style really gave them an opportunity to use their voice, which is just, I cry every time.
We've thought a lot about murals and how to bring artwork, like one, just like on the surface level tells a picture and is meaningful for whoever has seen it. But have you guys put any tech in there that it's like where you can go a layer deeper? And so if you're wearing, I don't know, if you have your phone and you kind of like a QR code and it takes you to more information. Do you guys incorporate any tech into your art ever?
You just speak my language with all of this stuff. So when we first started doing this storytelling, and it evolves, right? It evolves over time. It started with these static images. And in the most recent conference, we attended Vive last year, we created, and I'm all about immersive experiences. So we tried to create an improved, evolved immersive experience. And we had a series of walls. One side of the wall, you might have some visual cartoon pathway or artistic medium. Another side of the wall would actually have the videos with closed captions that might be a montage of the story. And then, of course, QR codes.
Yeah.
Because I love QR codes. And we created the first ResMed YouTube patient playlist. And part of the idea behind that was to say, how do you take these stories and put them in bite-sized, digestible bits, along with the quotes and the experience, but then also trying to provide people an opportunity where they could learn more information, whether that's through the association or otherwise. The first time we tried this, we actually did a QR code that went to the patient association group, because I'm all about how do you give people the tools. And then we've tried it a bunch of different ways. So I'm always excited to experiment with new ways.
Yeah, there's like the idea of AR, VR, like what's possible. Or even if you have a mural that's in real life that you could hopefully transfer into the virtual world. would be interesting?
I would love to do that. It's all money and time.
It is with everything.
It is with everything. But what I've been really excited about, particularly across the industry, is that you see so many more med tech, other companies leaning into that patient journey story or the clinician journey experience because it has so much more powerful. And with some of the newer technology, I'd be super excited to do any AR, VR. And I actually had some early conversations with someone who had a blink technology. So it would like change every time the person blinked into their headset. We haven't done anything like that yet, but just such great opportunities to explore storytelling in different ways.
Okay. If you ever have the time and money to go down that road, the only concern I have is as the glasses where I don't want to transition to contacts. I like my glasses. And I'm like, okay, well, what's my experience? Am I wearing glasses over glasses? What's the immersion?
It's a really good question. I mean, I'm not an expert in that field, but I actually wear glasses as well. And I cannot stand contacts. They stick to my eyeball.
Yeah, I don't do well with them.
In a very uncomfortable way. But it is a really good question. And I think the technology continues to evolve. And it was interesting just, what was it, yesterday, or maybe the initial Siemens Sony announcement around the industrial design using sort of that metaverse. To me, it looked like those glasses kind of came down over it so you could use both. I would assume that would be something that would be useful, but I go back to what I said at the beginning, which is all about inclusive design. And when you think about it.
So I mentioned to you before we pressed record that I live down in Baja. And so can we just dream for a second about the future of technology? Because I'm like, okay, my real use case scenario needs to be away from a plug-in, and away from Wi-Fi. It cannot be connected only to, what if I'm off grid? I'm totally off grid, unavailable, and I want a language translation. That would be really powerful to me to be able to go explore the world and not be stuck to having to plug something in and have it be something that makes it super obvious that I have a very expensive piece of technology on my face.
Totally agree. Off grid, again, speaking my language, I like to go up into the mountains a lot and there's no cell service. Right. So the only way, and I use All Trails as an app to help with any of my hiking, but the only way to do that is actually to download.
Exactly.
And so there's got to be different ways in which you can, utilize that type of technology. I mean, I think that one's pretty basic.
And that's part of it is we're in this perfect world where if everything is working just right, the technology is just so fancy and so impressive, but get into a real world scenario where people experience very normal problems, then it all falls apart.
I mean, going back to that inclusiveness, right? And the accessibility, there's so many rural communities, whether that's in the US or otherwise, that don't have access to broadband, that don't have access to internet, that it is too costly to go drive several hours into a doctor's office. So when you think about whether it's telehealth or chat or other modalities in which you can engage in healthcare, it becomes really important. And having the policies that support it, but then also the technology that's designed with that in mind is really critical.
I think we have a lot of really good people doing amazing things. That's not to take away from their good work. It's just we have to be thinking holistically around everybody, not just the people who currently have access. You said in your title sounded pretty big, and it said, if I remember correctly, global impact. In a lot, how do you not get overwhelmed with that?
Oh my goodness, it's incredibly overwhelming. And, ResMed, like many companies, are going through organizational change. And one of the things that I'm incredibly proud of is that some of the work that we incubated, and I report into our chief medical officer, but some of the work we've incubated in my team is now moving over into a broader marketing organization with the funding and the support. So I'm super excited. And it's often what I like to do is to start to incubate things and then put them deeper in the organization where they should sit with the right resources. So my way out of getting too overwhelmed is finding the right homes for things over time.
So starting small and then giving them a home where they can grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that a lot. Yeah. That sounds like a dream job.
It's fun. It's fun.
How did you get into what you do?
It's a good question. So my background is in science. I did work in immunology and vaccine research. I got into, my dad's in pharmaceuticals and my mom is a nurse. And she was always an advocate too, particularly for women's health, particularly for cardiovascular and women's health, which is often underreported, underdiagnosed. And so I learned from kind of both of them, both in my wanting to be an advocate and a voice for people in general to make healthcare better. And then also in trying to get innovations to market faster. And so I actually started in the regulatory quality, working with lots of governments to get products to market faster, being the bridge with engineers, et cetera. And then I really got excited about creating an advocacy program at ResMed to really work on policy in different ways. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that we do not have a political action committee. Mm-hmm. We work based on data and making all of our policy changes and really advocating.
And which kind of policy? Do you mean internal policy, regional policy, federal policy?
Absolutely. No, okay. It's a really good question. So primarily, and I'll just use the United States as an example, we primarily focus on federal policy. However, we engage with associations and organizations to support state policy, local policy. So we look at it from a broad perspective and then drill down as needed and put ourselves in positions to influence some of these more powerful organizations in a data-driven way. In Europe, it's a similar example. We work at the Brussels level, but then you also have, in the major markets, folks that work locally. And it's a lot of what it is to drive access and, work on a variety of activities. But for me, the most important thing is how does it align with the patient needs, the end user needs, the clinical pathway to really enable that access and affordability at the end of the day.
And which policies, if you don't mind geeking out, are on your radar right now?
Oof, so many. Given that we are at CES, policies tied to AI, of course, you can't get out of a conversation at CES without talking about AI. Data privacy, the United States is certainly behind in what Europe has done in terms of their broader privacy regulations and rules and their AI Act, et cetera. There's a lot of work being done at the federal level now to dig in further to all the things we've talked about for the last, decade is privacy, cybersecurity, AI, machine learning. And so trying to really, typically we take the approach of providing input and real world examples to policymakers on this is how it works in reality. And here are some of the barriers and challenges, because you can go very conservative in many ways in saying, let's close off all data, it can't be transmitted, but then you have challenges where a patient can't access something. Yeah. And there were some of those hiccups seen throughout COVID. So there is this, especially in health, it is a very fine balance. We are not a social media giant that's just using data to sell more products, that it really, you do have to think about the context. So that's on the radar. But we also look at a variety of other things like the regulation and policy that can dictate how a patient gets qualified for a particular diagnosis or therapy. And that requires clinical engagement, and it requires that clinical pathway expertise to say, okay, listen, if here are their symptoms, they should be authorized. And that often is working with insurance companies and with Medicare.
Yeah.
So it's kind of both on the federal side, data side, and then access and affordability.
Wow. That's a lot. You are involved in a lot of really cool things.
But I got a lot of really great people who are absolutely amazing, who are much smarter than me, who drive all of that amazing work.
How big is your team?
Oh gosh, it's a good question because it's changed over the years. It's gone anywhere from like 5 to 20 to back. And again, as I mentioned, as you move sort of functions into the right areas, it's always just such a pleasure to bring on people and just help cultivate them as leaders. And so obsoleting myself always.
Yeah.
They're amazing people.
Oh, I love that. That's basically the best kind of job ever. And honestly, that's a true sign of leadership. Mm-hmm. That's what I really believe that. Where you're just like, okay, I'm going to empower the people, coming up under me so that I'm no longer needed.
Absolutely. I mean, you also have to approach it with, you're learning all the time with everyone. And sometimes it's giving people the confidence and the courage and challenging their thinking, but really cultivating, particularly women. But, I enjoy mentoring across the board. And so it's fun.
Okay. Last question. What are you I have two more questions. I wanted to know we all had this idea of how COVID changed everything, right? Mm-hmm. As we were going through it, and then everyone just got tired of even saying the word for a while. We all want to pretend it's gone. In ResMed and the world after, and it's debatable if we're even after, but what do you think has changed in a way that is sticking?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
Yeah.
A couple of things. ResMed is also a ventilator manufacturer.
Okay.
So I didn't sleep. Most of ResMed didn't sleep trying to make sure that we got products to market where they were needed. And obviously supply chain crises and other things made it really challenging. So I come out of COVID, to your point, whether we're out, very proud of ResMed and ResMedians should be very proud of the work that they've done. There's two things I would say. One is, particularly in the United States, but this is also consistent in other parts of the world, because people had to be at home, this notion of enabling telehealth or remote engagement or, use another word that is about using text, audio, visual to engage with clinicians or care teams in a healthcare space has proven that has value and can work. And part of that in the United States was largely hindered by policies that essentially said, we're not going to pay for that type of work. And it's obviously a complex issue, but that is no longer, right? Yeah. So that's a lot of, I think, one of the fantastic things that have come out of it. And I think you see similar things in other places. I think the other area, and I, I'll mention this one particularly because of CES, but when you think about data and technology and the ability to have that right balance of information to think about population health, to think about risk, to think about patients more broadly and where you might need to target clinical care or provide access to technology in new ways, I still see that momentum continue. And there is an acknowledgement in markets and with policymakers around that balance of data.
Okay.
Again, and really segmenting, this isn't sort of social media. Healthcare data is special in many ways. And how do we help patients, clinicians utilize it in the right way, but also help us think about population health more broadly?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My last question officially is, what are you excited about for the future?
In life, in technology, yes, in tech.
When we stop, I'll ask you about in life, but for now, for in tech.
It's always a great question. I really was inspired by, honestly, the Siemens and Sony industrial design metaverse, and not even necessarily that specific technology, but I'll go back to the inclusivity, right? The ability to leverage folks and designers, patients, whatever it is, but to have people at the table who can collaborate effectively on developing the next generation of products and innovations that I can't imagine is so much more powerful if you're able to do it remotely and, again, collaboratively and inclusively.
Okay, thank you. If people want to follow you, connect with you, engage with you, where would you direct them?
I would direct them to LinkedIn.
Okay.
So you'll probably put it in the show notes anyway,
yes.
But just Larissa DAndrea.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
Me too. This has been great. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about us or this guest by going to our website or visiting us on any of the socials with the handle HitLikeAGirlPod. Thanks again. See you soon. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. I am truly grateful for you, and I'm wondering if you could do me a quick favor. Would you be willing to follow or subscribe to this podcast, or maybe leave us a rating or review? Or if you're feeling extra generous, would you share this episode on your Instagram stories or with a friend? All those things help us podcasters out so much. I'm the show's host, Joy Rios, and I'll see you next time.